Well, this is unexpected. Today we're going to be looking at a book. A couple of years ago, I made a video covering a Doom mod, MyHouse.WAD, that took great inspiration from the book House of Leaves. That video got... oh my god, some attention. One thing that came out from this though is that following the video, a lot of people went to read House of Leaves themselves, and it makes me happy still seeing comments from those who've done so. You should read House of Leaves if you haven't, it's great. Enough people did so that earlier this year, I was contacted by Pantheon Books and got sent a review copy of the new book from the author of House of Leaves, Mark Z. Danielewski. I was surprised, glad that my mispronunciation in the My House video didn't offend anyone. So, let's take a look at the new book, Tom's Crossing. It's a pretty big book. The setup for the book is that it's a western, though it takes place in 1982 Utah. We follow a teenage boy named Kalen, a scrawny kid who has a near magical talent for horses, not just riding, but soothing and understanding them. Kalen only has one friend, a slightly older boy named Tom, who is also renowned as a great rider. The two live in the town of Orvop and bond over riding horses with one another, Kalen riding a black mare named Navidad, and Tom riding a blood bay gelding called Mouse. Now the one issue with this is that Navidad and Mouse do not belong to these boys. They had been stealing rides on them from the paddock belonging to the Porch family, a wicked clan from the town headed by the patriarch Orwin Porch, a violent and greedy man who'd happily put down a perfectly healthy horse if it'd make him $1 richer, and maybe even if it wouldn't. Trouble comes one day when Tom gets cancer. On his deathbed, Tom makes Kalen swear that he will take those horses that they both love to a place called Tom's Crossing, where Navidad and Mouse will finally be free. He tells Kalen the way to go and passes away, and this begins our journey. Kalen must now navigate the wilderness and mountains of Utah in cold and wet October conditions to take both horses to the crossing. Along the way, he is joined by Tom's younger sister, Landry, who helps Kalen on his journey with her own horse, Jojo. The two teens share a connection over their love of horses and their departed Tom, whose ghost ever hangs over their ensuing journey. But of course, old Porch isn't going to let this lie, and our heroes find themselves trying to avoid pursuers from the family and the law as they try to scale the land itself. It's a great premise, and easy to get invested in. It carries on the tradition of Danielewski writing in different genres and styles with each of his books, rather than writing horror stories again like House of Leaves, or love stories again like House of Leaves. To get my own opinions up front and out of the way, I absolutely love this book. This is one of my favourite books that I've read in the last few years, and I'd highly recommend it to anyone who might be interested. It's exciting, well written, very approachable in its prose, and so many aspects of it have stuck inside my head and just left me thinking about it long after I finished the book. There is a lot to pick into here, but I'm not going to be getting into spoilers in this video, instead talking around events and what I took from the book. Considering who our author is, though, I think we have to consider the form of the book before we go into that. Firstly, wow, this is a big old book, isn't it? It measures at a whopping 1,232 pages. The only book I have that is longer than this is this specific copy of Ulysses, and that's only because a large percentage is made up of a foreword and endnotes to help you read it, and it's laid out to allow note-taking. Tom's Crossing, however, is all text, no supplement. Though I'm certain people who have read Danielewski's other books are thinking there's probably more to this. Danielewski has been famous for playing with the formatting we expect from a book, doing so to create unique effects for the reader. Sometimes though, that means that some pages might not take as long as you might think to read. Page count might be deceptive, and I wondered what form Tom's Crossing would take. Would it be like the winding labyrinthine passageways of House of Leaves with its layers of differing perspectives? Would it be like the loopy poetry of Only Revolutions, asking us to physically manipulate the book to get at the twin hearts of its revolving dual narrative? Or would it be like The Familiar, and do everything, all at once, at the same time? Well, Tom's Crossing has words that start at the top of the page, and then move from left to right across the page, and moving down line by line until we reach the bottom of the page, whereupon we turn to the next page and begin again. This is a book. This is a book book. I feel almost like an idiot for being amazed by this, but I genuinely didn't expect it when I started. It's certainly not unwelcome. Danielewski has shown when he's being conventional that he doesn't need this experimental structure as a crutch for his writing. He can write, and write well. That's not to say no consideration has gone into the form of the book. No spoilers, but I will say that I was surprised to see that there is apparently going to be an audiobook edition. I recommend the physical book, personally. So now we have 1,232 pages of pure book to get through. Fortunately, it is a good load of book. Richly, near indulgently detailed, but exciting, and knows exactly when to balance its peaks and troughs. The kid's journey over the mountains also has an incredibly realised sense of scale and place, putting us right alongside them. And the town does as well, with the community feeling like a tangible presence, both when we're near and far from civilization. It's all rich in history as well as geography, carefully considering the violent past from the time where it was being settled. The book is a western, after all, and it will touch frequently upon these storied and familiar conflicts. But don't get me wrong, this book is a joy to read, really, and that probably stems from its cast. All of these characters feel so incredibly full of life. Kaelin is a somewhat serious but kind boy, who we mostly revolve around, with a lighter side that gets to shine in happy moments. Landry is quite a loudmouthed twist of mischief, as she's described, with an imagination so wild that the less creative might swear that she has a head full of rocks, but I'd personally say it's her most endearing feature. Tom, lest we forget, was a boy who also always had a smile on his face, and found jokes and humour in everything he did, and you'll be hearing a lot about all the trouble that he got up to even after he departed this world. And this is to say nothing of the irreprehensible Porch family. But there's more than just them that we go on this journey with. There are also the horses. Make no mistake that the horses in this book are characters in their own right, and there is no better way to make us consider the strange knack that Kaelin has with horses than to make us empathize and understand the animals that we are with. Mouse, Navidad, Jojo, and more horses besides are given just as much words as some of the human characters in the story, and display charm and personality all of themselves. In several ways, the book reminded me a lot of Cormac McCarthy, though no, not the violent book. Instead, it made me think of All the Pretty Horses from his Borders trilogy. Though McCarthy's prose, sharp and thunderous like a biblical preacher, makes for a bit of a contrast to the upbeat chewing in Tom's Crossing, both books seem to take great care when talking about horses, making sure to present the animals with both sweetest affection, but also giving them a kind of awe that makes you feel there is something divine about the horse. Each of them is distinct, but are presented with such a palpable majesty and air of mystery that makes you love and care for each of them, and also understand that there is more to them than just being animals meant to shoulder our burdens. There is a dignity to these creatures, and maybe more that could be found in some people. But I'd like to move on to the writing. I've mentioned the book is long a few times, and it's hard to forget when you have something so large and heavy in your hands. It'll train your muscles as well as your mind. One reason why it is so long is the way that it's written, transcribed as if someone telling the story orally, and it gives the effect of someone wizened and storied spinning an old yarn, complete with many asides and roundabout ways through a sentence, and with a rustic country tone to every word. Let me read you the very first section to give you a sense of it. Hard to figure how so much awful horror could have started out with just them two horses, not a one yet named, both minding their own business on that spring afternoon near the tree streets, nosing hay scraps at the back of Pataquet, with a new kid minding his own business too, sitting himself real quiet on a fence rail and, just like them horses, also nibbling on a blade of grass. Peaceful as peaceful gets. I don't know where that accent came from. That first bit is all one sentence, but I won't deny it is evocative. You could write this more directly. A boy and some horses were relaxing one afternoon, but then you would lose so much of its flavour and richness. It makes itself apparent that it's a narrative being spoken near immediately, and gives gravity to the horses before we even acknowledge the new kid, who is Kaelin, by the way. We paint a picture of a scene that is indeed as peaceful gets, that the conversational manner manages to make more peaceful by its informal delivery. Also, note the particular way it's written. I've transcribed these words exactly as they appear in the book. The G is dropped from every ing suffix, enhancing the feeling of that country drawl, as well as certain words being replaced with how they sound in the narrator's accent rather than how they are normally spelled, such as hisself here. You can find this all over the book. A man who's filled himself up at dinner has had enough. A bandit shot by a lawman has been killed. A fool who's lost his drawers is naked. And plenty more examples besides. Sometimes writing in an accent can be alienating or demeaning, but the effect here is actually quite homely. It's like listening to campfire stories and just as cozy and reassuring, even when the tale takes twists and turns. This is the narrator's voice too, rather than this accent appearing on any one person to other them from the rest of the cast. It doesn't make any character feel the same, they are all quite distinct to one another in dialogue, but having this universal drawl actually enhances the wider feeling of community within the piece, something that the book looks at a lot when it considers the characters and their perspectives. Not only are we following Kaylin and Landry on their journey through the mountains, but we also see their mothers back at the hometown during this time, who, unsure of where their kids have gone and what they're doing, have to navigate the judgment and ire of their neighbors. It's a close-knit Utah town, with everything that comes with that. We also, however, take the perspective of the Porch family and see the machinations at work there. You, the reader, will rarely wonder what old Porch is up to. You'll see it for yourself and writhe in the dramatic irony as characters who don't know better come close to the Porches or wander within the scope of their plans. If you think I'm overselling their wickedness, listen, at times I was reminded of Baron Harkonnen from Dune, except if he was a cowboy. But also of import, perhaps the most import, are the people who aren't actually part of the story, but have heard the story before, or told the story before, or knew the people involved in the story. Something might happen, and then the next paragraph will be about someone sharing their own angles or interpretations on the people or events unfolding, or even making artwork based on what you just read. The very first page, the very next paragraph after what I read to you earlier, is in fact of someone trying to capture that idle spring afternoon in paint, and there's plenty more examples throughout the entire book. It creates a strange effect where you are suddenly examining this tale from different distances. Sometimes you are up close with the characters, but other times you are invited to take a step back and appreciate, or pontificate even, on certain moments. Even tiny, insignificant moments, where someone will ask questions and share views on what is happening, or try to use art in order to replicate it in some fashion, whether it's literal events or what it evokes. This is all also being told by the narrator, so they are also keen to share some of what they think as well. This happens throughout the book, and it was certainly peculiar, but never felt like it was getting in the way of proceedings. In fact, I wasn't even out of the prologue of the book when I was struck by what this was reminding me of. This is like House of Leaves, right? One of House of Leaves' most prominent stylistic quirks is its footnotes, whereby someone will be quoted and cited from some source, usually fictional, sharing their own interpretations of the events of the fictional film that the book is about. That's more or less what is happening here, but it's not exactly the same. In House of Leaves, the footnotes were by academic professionals, interpreting events through the lens of an artist making art, even if these were things that in-universe had actually happened, sort of. So the characters' trauma and history were often depersonalized and deconstructed to serve a narrative or underlying message that was seen to be conveyed. Here in Tom's Crossing, these asides are often the musings and works of regular local people who were close to the events that happened. Everything that they share is much more personable and human. The community have adopted this tale, and they will too have their own interpretations and allegorical comparisons, but it strikes a vastly different tone and purpose. The effect of this is that it makes Tom's Crossing feel like a modern-day myth. It's a tale that has these set moments that make up the narrative, but the people involved and the actions they take are framed through many differing perspectives, and the artwork that captures those moments immortalize them. This is almost certainly the intentional effect, as the book does explicitly mention actual ancient tales and myth, and you can draw comparisons between how they are told. Take the myth of Orpheus and Eurydice for a non-specific example. Orpheus is leading his love out of the underworld, instructed to never turn around and face her until they are both out, so they can be together again. As Orpheus leaves, he turns, but Eurydice hasn't yet left, and so is taken to the underworld forever. You might know this story already, but why did Orpheus turn around? Maybe you also heard a reason he did, out of absent-mindedness, joy, a mistake interpreting the rules, or a belief that she really was out of the underworld. Was Orpheus cocksure in his quest to win her back, and thus his failing is his comeuppance? Or was he a tragic figure, smitten by a pure love, and it is that passion that blinded him? Events, small moments, decisions, all of this in Tom's Crossing may also be queried and stripped back, with different answers depending on who tells the story and how they see the narrative. There is an equally important question that often crops up that also plays into the mythological angle. What if? It's a tantalizing and haunting question in mythology, often fraught with mishaps and mistakes, that ends up drawing you in further. What if Orpheus had not turned around? What if Theseus had not forgotten to fly white sails to announce his victory instead of the black sails that erroneously told his father that he had failed? What if swift-footed Achilles had resolved his ire with Agamemnon and fought on the battlefield of Troy instead of Patroclus? And indeed, many will look to the events here, the tiniest details, the split-second choices and the careless mistakes that we can see with the benefit of hindsight, and wonder, what if things had gone even slightly differently? It creates an incredible sense of foreboding. We are constantly aware of these events having happened to this community, and leaving a lasting effect and impact when they did so. The views and comments that you hear are said with the knowledge of what comes after before you know it, so you're constantly aware of trials and maybe even tragedies to come. It's a long and winding road, and the future hangs over you constantly as you traverse it. But you'll never want to leave the path. I found Tom's Crossing incredibly hard to put down partly because of this, and I think it says a lot considering how heavy it is. I was always wanting to read just one more page, make sure Kaelin and Landry made it to the next safe place before I could put it down again. There is a lot I am leaving out talking about this because I want you to read it and see what is inside for yourself. I have barely even scratched the surface, not just of the plot, which I've avoided talking about even its earliest moments, but even some of the central themes and ideas presented in the book. It's very readable too. Occasionally I'll dip into some interesting words that I'll have to look up, but overall I was fine. Kind of like McCarthy again, actually. But overall still very approachable. If you manage to read House of Leaves, you'll do alright with this. If you read only Revolutions, you can read anything. Speaking of, you're probably burning with the question of, is this as good as House of Leaves? And that is both a fair question and an unfair one. They are so different after all that a comparison just seems arbitrary, but in terms of how I felt after I had finished the book, they're actually pretty comparable. It's hard to know if it'll have as much of a splash as House of Leaves, as that book's ergodic structure was quite a hook compared to being a big old book. But personally, I loved it. I loved Tom's Crossing. I loved every second of Tom's Crossing, and I got so much out of my journey that I'm a little sad I can't get into it all. Well, there is one thing I want to mention, and it ties into the state of this book I have here. I received this book around May, and I spent the whole summer reading this in between doing other work and other reading. It didn't just sit on my desk either. I took it around with me, read it outside when the weather was nice, and as you can see, the book itself is a little worn and weathered from this. Dog-eared on one corner, and along the pages you can see where the sun bleached the edges on those rare days where the sun actually shines on the UK. I don't care much about it looking pristine, because a cowboy in clean boots never rode a day in his life, right? There are marks left behind on our possessions through wear and time, and there are similarly marks on all of us from our own battles. Maybe they're only visible to us or those who know us well, or maybe they're always present and unavoidable. But while the marks themselves may hold a story, they aren't the whole story. A scratch may last, but it is only an instant. Where were we? What were we doing? When was it? Did we think we'd be scratched? Did we want it? Was someone else there? Was it someone else who did it? And so many more different parts of a story that aren't told by a scratch, and can only really be understood if you were there when that scratch appeared. Yet this story is just one of many that you have. Just because there is a sign of this story, that does not mean it is the most important, regardless of its visible prominence, of its feeling or pain, or what anyone else might observe about it. This is still a book, if a little beaten over a hectic summer. It is not its marks. The mark is a sign of a story, but it's not the whole story, and neither the mark or that story is you. You are not your marks. You have so much more to tell than just that little stepping stone that was on your path. I think this is the point where I need to wrap things up. Even if there's so much that I'd want to talk about, like comparing it to Danielewski's other books, which I've been waving around here, everyone wants the dream, but we can't talk about it right now. You should read Tom's Crossing. It is an utterly fantastic book that I got so much out of. When I finished it, I was thinking about how much I wanted to read it again in the future, and considering how long it is, that's the biggest endorsement I could possibly give. So yeah, I love Tom's Crossing, and I recommend it. And with all that said and done, it's time for me to make like a house and... Thank you for watching this video. This was quite fun to make, and I'd be interested in doing more videos like this. I don't do calls to action very often, but if you liked this too, a like, a comment, and sharing it might go a long way. This was very different to what I usually do, and I am worried YouTube might bury it in that way that it does when someone tries doing something different. I was actually working on a House of Leaves video as well, but that was spiraling out of control, and I was starting to feel like Johnny from the book. But who knows? If this does well, we can look into that again. A special thank you to my Patreon as well, and the supporters whose patience allows me to make new projects. I have actually opened up YouTube memberships, so that people can support me here as well as Patreon. All update posts for supporters on Patreon will be posted on the YouTube community feed for members here. I'll keep the questions and producer stuff to the Patreon for now though. And speaking of questions, we're coming up on the end of 2025 pretty quickly. Do you have your Game of the Year locked in yet? Blueprints is up there. No game has made me feel quite so crazy, maybe ever? Although Deltarune still continues to be incredible, that dog really knows how to steal my undivided attention. You seem to really enjoy books that demand a level of buy-in or interactivity from the reader. Does that carry over to a fondness for mysteries as a genre? Yes! I've been going through all the Sherlock Holmes stories for a while now, and I'm almost done. I'm not the kind of person who tries to solve the mystery as it happens though, I just get too invested in the drama, and I want to let the detective do it. Unless it's something that asks me to put the pieces together, then I can fall down the rabbit hole. Are there any games releasing next year that you are looking forward to? Off the top of my head, Resident Evil Requiem and Pragmata, GTA 6, though that is quite a pedestrian answer, ironically. Ultra Kill is probably the biggest one, but that's not confirmed to be out next year, I'm just hoping it is. I want to do a big replay before the final layers come out, and I'm just waiting for it to be done. And that's everything. Have a happy Halloween. A cowboy might not seem all that scary, but, well, maybe you just don't know any better. See you next time. I remember when this was all just a hobby.